Welcome to Secrets of History, where the past unveils its darkest mysteries. A family estate tucked deep in the woods, quiet for generations. Empty cribs, locked rooms, and a name etched into every headstone, always followed by the same title, Firstborn Son. For over a century, in a remote corner of rural England, a peculiar and horrifying pattern unfolded each time a firstborn son entered the world. He would never see adulthood. No matter the year, no matter the mother, no matter how healthy, how hopeful, or how heavily protected. Every firstborn boy died. And not just that they died the same way. Always alone. Always in the same room. Always between midnight and 3 a.m. And here's the thing, no one could ever agree on how. Doctors were baffled. Priests whispered of curses. Midwives refused to return. The family stopped speaking to outsiders. Some claimed they stopped speaking at all. What kind of legacy turns birth into a death sentence? What silence hangs over a family so thick, even the portraits seem to look away? Tonight, we're unraveling the deeply disturbing and still unsolved mystery of a bloodline haunted by repetition, where every firstborn son died the same horrifying way. And no one, not even now, knows why. A powerful introduction begins not with information, but with a question, specifically, an eerie, thought-provoking one that lingers in the mind. When an audience presses play, they aren't looking to be told what happened right away. They want to be pulled into a feeling, a sense of unease, something that gently pricks the back of their neck. So instead of immediately stating facts or detailing the timeline of deaths, the story opens with a whisper of a mystery. Imagine this, or what if every time a baby was born, someone knew he wouldn't live? A question like this creates a space for dread, inviting the viewer to participate in the unknown. It forces the mind to start filling in the blanks, to wonder, to worry. And that's where the story starts to live, in the space between curiosity and fear. Why did the family lock their doors, and what's hiding in those empty cribs? Don't miss the next chilling clue. This technique isn't about clever phrasing alone. It's about tapping into the primal part of us that fears patterns we can't explain. A question at the beginning isn't just rhetorical, it sets the emotional tone. It immediately destabilizes the listener's sense of normalcy. Questions imply that something isn't right, and if the question is chilling enough, the listener will stay until they understand why. Starting with something haunting, an empty nursery, a family who stops naming their firstborn sons, a line of graves all bearing the same name and age, works because it flips the usual flow of storytelling. Instead of giving the who, what, when, and why, the narrative opens with a subtle alarm bell. Something is wrong here, and you're going to want to know how deep that wrongness goes. A well-placed, chilling question also avoids overwhelming the listener with too much exposition too soon. It's a psychological gateway, a single line that the audience crosses, not realizing that once they do, they've committed to finding out more. The nature of human curiosity ensures they'll keep listening, because unresolved tension demands a resolution even if, in the end, that resolution never comes. This approach works particularly well for stories rooted in mystery, darkness, or the supernatural, because it reflects the same ambiguity that the tale itself contains. We open with a question because the story itself is a question, and not one that's easily answered. The audience isn't being told a story, they're being invited into it, as if handed the first piece of a puzzle they didn't ask for. Setting a somber, unsettling tone from the very beginning is crucial in a mystery that leans into the eerie and the unexplained. Before the facts, before the family names or the chilling deaths, there has to be atmosphere. This isn't just about using dark visuals or creepy music, it's about language that feels heavy, cold, and slow, like the first step into an old, abandoned house. Every word should carry weight. Sentences linger a little longer. Pauses stretch. The air in the story should feel thick with silence, as though something unseen is listening. When the tone is crafted carefully, it wraps around the listener like fog, not giving them a full view, but enough to know something's out there, just past the edge of understanding. What silenced the family, and why did the doctors fail to save a single son? Keep watching to unravel the deadly pattern. In a story like this, where death repeats itself like clockwork and reason falls short, the tone needs to do more than just describe, it needs to disturb. It has to create the feeling that something is deeply wrong, not just with the events, but with the place, the bloodline, the history. Language becomes a tool of unease. Words like quiet, still, empty, or forgotten gain power because of how they're placed. A hallway isn't just a hallway, it's a narrow stretch of darkness where sound doesn't carry. A nursery isn't just where a child once slept, it's a room sealed shut for decades, dust coating the crib, the mobile above it unmoving for years. The house doesn't have lights that won't turn on, it has shadows that don't leave. Everything in the story becomes a reflection of the tragedy, of the mystery, and that reflection is warped, unsettling, and deeply quiet. Tone also comes from pacing. A slower cadence, deliberate pauses, and carefully chosen silence between sentences force the listener to sit with each unsettling image. There's no need to rush. In fact, speeding up would kill the effect. The horror in this story isn't in the jump scares or sudden revelations, it's in the build-up, the quiet unraveling, the growing sense that something ancient and cruel is pulling strings no one can see. It's not about how loud the story can get, it's about how quietly it crawls under your skin. Even the way information is introduced follows this rule: slow, sparse, and deliberate. You don't throw everything at the audience at once. You let it drip, like water from a cracked ceiling in a house that no one should still be living in. Introducing the mystery gradually is what allows tension to grow naturally, feeding the audience just enough to keep them uncomfortable but intrigued. You don't walk into a haunted story and immediately flip on all the lights. You crack open the door, let the cold air spill out, and wait. When the strange deaths of a family's firstborn sons is the core of your story, revealing too much too soon drains it of its eerie power. Instead, you start with fragments, odd family behavior, a locked room no one enters anymore, an heirloom that's never passed down. These small details invite questions, and those questions keep the listener hooked long before any real answers arrive. What room holds the secret to their deaths, and why does it strike only at night? Stay to uncover the hidden horror. The audience shouldn't be told upfront that every firstborn son dies in the same horrifying way. Let them sense something's wrong before they know what it is. Mention how generations of a once wealthy family slowly disappeared, how town records show a strange gap in living heirs, how villagers still avoid walking past the family's crumbling estate. You let the suspicion grow on its own. A name repeated across multiple gravestones. A midwife who retired suddenly and refused to speak about why. A mother who never celebrated the birth of her first child. These moments layer unease without revealing the full. By leaning into repetition, the horror becomes ritualistic. Rooms are sealed. Clocks stop at the same time. Weather patterns mimic those of past deaths. Family portraits are left unfinished. Generations begin to mirror each other not just in fate, but in behavior. Everything becomes a cycle. There's no progress. No resolution. Just a slow descent into resignation. And with each death, the mystery deepens rather than clears. No witness survives to give answers. No sign of struggle. No medical cause. Just another firstborn, another lifeless body, another unanswered question. The pattern itself becomes the monster. It's not a person, or a place, or a curse you can name. It's the repetition. The fact that no matter what anyone does, leave the house, change the name, break tradition, it still happens. That inevitability is where true horror lives. Hinting at folklore and superstition without fully committing to an explanation allows the mystery to breathe, to feel older and deeper than anything that can be explained by logic alone. When strange events occur repeatedly, people naturally look for meaning, especially in places where science fails. Folklore and superstition are often born out of fear and a need for control, and in a story where every firstborn son dies the same horrifying way, that need becomes desperate. Over time, the whispers begin. Someone says the family angered a spirit. Someone else claims a deal was made generations ago. The villagers stop saying the family's name out loud. Maybe an old woman in the village swears she saw the mark of the dead on the baby's crib before the child was even born. But these are only fragments, rumors passed down in hushed tones, nothing ever written, nothing ever proven. What ancient spirit or pact could doom a family like this, and did they ever try to fight it? Stay to discover the whispered truths. The power in invoking folklore lies in its ambiguity. You never need to confirm if it's real. The uncertainty is the fear. A story like this benefits from blurred lines between what's fact and what's belief. When characters in the family start following old rituals, covering mirrors, burning herbs, refusing to speak the baby's name until after their first birthday, it adds depth to the atmosphere. Are they protecting their children from something real? Or are they just trying anything, because nothing else has worked? These traditions can come off as strange to outsiders, but to the family, they might be all they have left. And when the deaths keep happening anyway, it only deepens the question, was the folklore always true, or did they create it to survive something they can't understand? These whispered beliefs give the story texture. Maybe there's a story about a woman wronged in the 1600s, and some claim she cursed the family line with her dying breath. Maybe there's a tree near the estate said to bleed when the next child is doomed. Or a book hidden in the attic, written in a language no one now speaks. These pieces don't need to be explored in full, just showing they exist is enough to unsettle. They make the world feel lived in, the horror rooted not just in death, but in history. By keeping these elements as possibilities rather than explanations, you preserve the tension. The audience doesn't know whether to believe the lore, dismiss it, or fear it. And that uncertainty, being caught between folklore and fact, is what keeps them listening. Because what if the answer really is something ancient, cruel, and forgotten? Or worse, what if it's not, and something even more terrifying is to blame? Establishing the historical scope of the mystery is essential to giving it weight. A single tragic event is sad. But when that event stretches across decades, or even centuries, it transforms into something far more chilling. A pattern that spans generations carries the echo of something deeply rooted, possibly unchangeable. It makes the mystery feel old, like it's been festering in the background of time itself, silently devouring the same lives over and over again. And when the same horror plays out repeatedly throughout a family's lineage, the past begins to feel just as present as the current moment. The audience is not just hearing a story, they're stepping into a legacy of dread. How did this curse survive centuries, and what stopped the family from escaping it? Don't miss the next dark chapter. This kind of time-spanning narrative forces listeners to confront the idea that the mystery isn't confined to a single moment or lifetime. It has endurance. It survives through war, through progress, through medicine and science and logic. No matter how much changes in the world, this one thing, this death of the firstborn, remains the same. That resistance to time makes the phenomenon feel even more unnatural. What kind of force can survive the passing of centuries without explanation, without error, without exception? It makes the deaths feel intentional, almost ritualistic, as if the calendar itself is in on the curse. Using history also allows the story to become layered. You can reference events from different eras, the way the family responded in the 1800s, what the local newspapers said in 1923, how a distant cousin tried to flee the country in 1967 but still lost his son under identical circumstances. Maybe an ancestor kept a journal, brittle and yellowed, filled with half-erased ink and desperate scribbles. Maybe each generation tried something different to break the cycle, but every attempt ended in silence. When history is woven in like this, the mystery becomes a cold thread that runs through the entire family's bloodline. It also shifts the tone from coincidence to inevitability. The longer the pattern stretches, the more futile resistance seems. The audience begins to feel the weight of time pressing down on the present moment. Even characters in the story might begin to behave like their fates are already written, shaped by a legacy that cannot be altered. The horror then isn't just in the deaths themselves, but in the knowledge that others have already died the same way, and more will follow. The past becomes a mirror, reflecting the same image over and over, no matter how far forward the family walks. And with every new generation, the question grows louder: how do you escape a history written in death? Avoiding a clear resolution is one of the most effective ways to keep an audience uneasy long after the story ends. In stories rooted in darkness and generational mystery, the most terrifying thing is often the lack of closure. People are hardwired to seek patterns, answers, explanations, but when those answers never come, it leaves a vacuum that feels heavier than any final twist ever could. The audience isn't given the relief of resolution. Instead, they're left sitting in the unknown, wondering how something so specific, so horrifying, can remain unsolved for so long. That's where real fear lingers, not in what we know, but in what we can't explain. What baffled doctors for generations, and why do the deaths defy all logic? Stay to face the unanswered horror. In this story, the repeated deaths of firstborn sons follow a pattern so exact it seems impossible not to solve. And yet, no explanation ever holds. A doctor once blamed congenital heart failure, but how does that explain the same hour of death, the same expression on their faces, the same final gasp? One investigator thought it was carbon monoxide, but no leak was ever found. A priest suggested divine punishment, but for what sin, no one could agree. Every time someone thought they were close to an answer, something didn't fit, one detail out of place, one death that still followed the pattern despite all precautions taken. Over time, the mystery didn't unravel. It thickened. Leaving the story unresolved also mirrors real-life folklore and family legends. How many stories get passed down with no clear beginning or ending, just fragments and warnings and silences? Some of the most enduring mysteries are the ones where everyone knows what happened, but no one knows why. That kind of lingering uncertainty is more disturbing than a clear villain or logical explanation, because it offers no comfort. There's no one to blame, no step to take to make it stop. It just is. Even the people within the story start to give up on finding answers. A mother may stop asking why her son died. A grandfather may burn the family records rather than study them. The silence grows heavier, not lighter, as time goes on. And for the audience, that silence feels unnatural, unsettling. The story ends not with a reveal, but with the sense that this horror could still be happening, somewhere, in a house no one visits anymore. Or worse, it might happen again. Because if something so specific and horrific can remain unresolved for this long, what else is out there, hiding behind patterns we haven't noticed yet? Using intimate, unsettling imagery draws the audience into the emotional core of the story, not just the horror, but the familiarity of it. To make a story about generational death truly land, the horror needs to feel personal. It's not enough to talk about a child dying. You paint the scene so vividly that the listener feels the dust in the corners of the nursery, hears the faint ticking of a clock that always stops at the same hour, sees the untouched baby clothes folded neatly in drawers no one dares open anymore. These aren't just visual cues, they're emotional anchors. They speak to grief that never left, spaces frozen in time, and lives that were never lived. What lies in those sealed rooms, and why do the clocks always stop? Don't turn away from the family's frozen nightmare. Describing a room that's been sealed since 1934 does more than explain a location, it suggests pain so deep the door had to be closed forever. Maybe the mobile still hangs above the crib, unmoving. Maybe a candle is always left burning in the hallway, though no one knows who lights it. These kinds of details make the supernatural or mysterious feel grounded. They don't rely on special effects or jump scares, they rely on atmosphere. Stillness. Objects left behind. The subtle suggestion that grief has a physical presence in the home. Even the way the deaths are hinted at should be specific and visual. Not just he died in his sleep, but they found him lying perfectly still, hands folded on his chest, eyes half open like he'd seen something before the end. These tiny descriptions stay with the audience. They're small, but they invite the imagination to fill in the blanks, and what the mind conjures is almost always more terrifying than what can be directly shown or explained. This level of intimacy also serves to humanize the victims. It's easy to become desensitized to death when it's spoken about generically. But when you talk about a boy who never got to ride the bike his father built for him, or the way a mother never took the baby's name tag off the hospital wristband, the story hits harder. These aren't just generational tragedies, they're individual ones. And each death, though part of a pattern, still feels personal, unique, unfair. By leaning into unsettling imagery, the story transforms from a list of strange events into a lived-in nightmare. The house isn't just haunted, it's saturated with the past. Every object, every room, every silence carries weight. And that weight is what draws the listener deeper, until they're not just hearing the story, they're standing inside it. Foreshadowing possible explanations without confirming any of them keeps the audience suspended in a constant state of anticipation. It allows the mind to wander, to explore dark corners and entertain theories, only to realize that none of them quite fit. When something as specific as the death of every firstborn son repeats across generations, people will naturally try to explain it, listeners included. Suggesting just enough potential causes gives the illusion that answers might be close, while making sure they never fully arrive. It's a delicate balance between leading and misleading, keeping the audience emotionally and mentally engaged in the search for meaning. Could it be cursed ground, a rare illness, or a secret pact, and which one's the truth? Stay to chase the elusive answer. Maybe the house sits on cursed ground, the remains of something older buried just beneath the foundation. Maybe there's a medical condition so rare and specific that no one's ever been able to properly diagnose it. Perhaps the deaths only began after one ancestor returned from war and never spoke of what he saw. Or maybe, buried deep in the family's financial records, there's a strange deposit that appears once every generation, always in the same month, always under a name no one recognizes. These details don't have to be expanded or confirmed. Their purpose is to haunt the story, to keep the possibility space wide and unsettling. The goal isn't to build a roadmap to the truth, it's to make every possible road end in fog. The audience should constantly feel like they're on the edge of a breakthrough, only for the ground beneath them to shift again. Maybe a neighbor swears she saw a strange light in the nursery window the night before the latest death. Maybe the family once hired a medium who never spoke after leaving the house. Maybe the attic door is nailed shut from the outside. Each of these elements creates room for the listener to speculate: is this supernatural, psychological, inherited, intentional? This method also builds character depth without giving too much away. A father might quietly visit a chapel at the edge of the village every week but refuse to speak about religion. A grandmother might flinch when she hears a baby cry, even though her own son died 50 years ago. These actions suggest private knowledge or guilt, but they're never explained outright. They simply exist, and that's enough to imply that some members of the family may know more than they're saying, or worse, that they've stopped trying to understand because they already know the cost of asking. By foreshadowing without confirming, the story becomes an unsolvable riddle. The audience isn't just witnessing horror, they're participating in the tension, combing through each moment for a truth that always stays just out of reach. Ending the introduction with a haunting question leaves the audience suspended in unease, compelling them to dive deeper into the mystery. Instead of providing answers or neatly tying up loose ends, a carefully crafted question invites the listener to wrestle with the unknown. It echoes long after the words fade, like a shadow that refuses to leave. A question such as, why would fate or something darker choose to snuff out every firstborn son in the same terrifying way? Or is this family cursed? Or is there something else lurking beneath the surface, lingers in the mind, unsettling and persistent? Why does this curse keep claiming firstborns, and will it ever stop? Don't miss the final haunting question. This kind of ending works because it shifts the narrative from something told to something experienced. The audience isn't just passive, they become active participants in the unfolding enigma. It forces them to ask their own questions, to imagine scenarios, to wonder about motives and forces beyond human understanding. The story, in that moment, becomes a puzzle missing its final piece, inviting speculation, theories, and even fear. It primes the audience for a journey into darkness, where certainty is scarce and every answer breeds more questions. The question also serves as a thematic anchor, tying together all the ominous hints laid out before it. It encapsulates the story's core conflict, the terrifying repetition of death with no explanation, and makes the unknown the central focus. Instead of the audience seeking closure, they are drawn into the void, compelled to explore what lies beneath the surface of the family's tragic history. Moreover, a haunting question captures the tone of unresolved dread that defines the entire mystery. It's not a cliffhanger in the conventional sense, it's more profound. It acknowledges that some stories don't end with tidy solutions or justice served. Instead, they end in the same place they began, in darkness, in uncertainty, in fear. This leaves the audience with a lingering chill, a sense that the horror hasn't passed, but is waiting, patient and unrelenting. By concluding the introduction with such a question, the storyteller establishes an emotional and intellectual hook. The audience is primed to listen closely, to pick up every whispered clue, and to remain alert for the unseen threads that connect past and present. It promises that what follows is not just a tale of death, but a journey into the heart of something ancient and inexplicable, an invitation that few can resist. As the shadows of this unsolved mystery fade into the past, the secrets of history await you. Subscribe now to Secrets of History, and join us as we unearth more chilling tales from the abyss of time. Hit that bell icon, and let the past whisper its truths to you next time.